this is Jen. In this video, I'd like to address a commonly asked question and one that I received from one of you guys recently. How should we incorporate context in literary analysis essays? So I'll start this video by explaining what context means in English Lit Studies, why context matters to you as an English Lit student, and finally, I'll give you 3 useful guiding questions to think about including context in your next analysis essay, and I'll also demonstrate with George Orwell's Animal Farm how you can write a kick-ass paragraph that weaves together context and analysis. So if this sounds like something that you need, then make sure you stick around and keep watching. In general, context refers to the surrounding circumstances that form the setting for an event, statement, idea, and in terms of which it can be understood. But in a nutshell, context is just a situation in which many different things happen. So if we apply that to literary studies, we can simply understand context as the historical background of a work. And by historical, that would include economic, social, political, cultural, and biographical circumstances. Now, rarely do we ever come across great literary works which aren't influenced by their wider contemporary context, because most authors don't live or write in a social vacuum, and so they are necessarily impacted by the external events and ideas around them. For instance, Charles Dickens wrote Hard Times against the backdrop of post-industrial revolution London, where capitalist exploitation and urban pollution were rampant. Jane Austen wrote Emma in a society where women cared more about getting married than gaining independence. And Wilfred Owen wrote the poem Dulce et Decorum Est and as many other war poems to reflect the horrific conditions suffered by frontline soldiers in World War I. Now, there are, of course, writers like the Decadents and the Symbolists who believed in art for art's sake, such as Oscar Wilde and Charles Baudelaire. But even as they propounded the theory, their works still reflected social issues and embodied cultural ideas, and so were in no way divorced from their broader context, despite the author's aesthetic ideologies. So, why does context matter? Now, if you're an English Lit student, context matters to you for 2 main reasons. First, context helps us gain a deeper understanding of the purpose, themes, and messages of any literary work, because authors are always inspired by real-life occurrences, and usually by significant socio-political events and cultural shifts. Yes, even for someone like Henry David Thoreau, who famously decided to live like a hermit in a log cabin by a pond, but that was only for 2 years. Second, showing contextual awareness is almost always required for exams. It's an assessment objective in virtually all English Lit courses, from your GCSEs and IGCSEs to ASA levels to your IBs, AP, etc., as you'll see in the following slides. So the big takeaway, ignore context at your own peril. To incorporate contextual links in your analysis, I've come up with 3 guiding questions that you can consider to make the process easier. Given what I know about the historical background of the work, what are some similar events, characters, or patterns between the text and the time when the author was writing the text? Given the socio-political and/or economic conditions of the author's context, what would a person similar to the character in the text most likely do, think, or feel in that sort of environment? Why would the author be so influenced or impacted by what was going on around her to want to write a creative work about it? What is the historical significance of those events? By the way, guys, if you find this video helpful so far, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the thumbs up button below and also subscribe to my channel so that I can keep making these English Lit study videos for you down the line. Let's now apply these 3 guiding questions to see how we can incorporate contextual links in an analysis paragraph. So here's a paragraph taken from a student essay titled, "How is Napoleon the Boar presented in George Orwell's Animal Farm?" In this main body paragraph, you'll see that the student does a fair job of presenting a focused point. Napoleon is portrayed as a menacing and dictatorial character. And she also backs it up with relevant textual evidence, as you'll see from the quote from chapter 5, and analyzes the use of a literary technique, which is foreshadowing. But of course, there is a missing piece, and that is the contextual link. So how can we relate Napoleon's characterization to the novella's historical context? Now, to start, we should know that Orwell wrote Animal Farm as a satirical allegory of Stalinist totalitarianism, and that Napoleon is most likely based on Joseph Stalin, who ruled the USSR in a tyrannical fashion at the time when Orwell wrote his book in 1943. But the work itself was published in 1945. So with that, we can make further use of our three guiding questions to help us formulate our points. First, we know that Napoleon and Stalin are both tyrannical characters who require absolute subservience from their subjects, and they command authority mostly by spreading mass terror. Like Stalinist Russia, Animal Farm is subject to totalitarian rule with a strong personality cult centered on the supreme leader, which in the fictional case is Napoleon. Now, in terms of the second question, if someone gained absolute power over a group of obedient followers, no need for moral or social accountability, he would most likely maximize such outsized authority for his own benefit, in addition to suppressing all voices of opposition as a means to secure his rule. And we know this because of how human nature works, and also from sundry historical examples. And finally, as a staunch believer in socialist democratic ideals of freedom, liberty, and equality, Orwell would have been outraged by the Soviet Union's blatant suppression of these values, and indeed he was. In the face of British support for the USSR as a World War II ally though, Orwell could not have written an explicit critique of Stalin without meeting considerable pushback from his publishers, which perhaps explains why he had chosen an allegorical format and an anthropomorphic approach to characterization for Animal Farm. Now that we're equipped with all of this knowledge, let's try weaving in the contextual information to upgrade our paragraph. Now you notice that in this version, we demonstrate at the very start of the paragraph our awareness of the wider political context which had inspired the novella. Specifically, we do this by bringing in the reference to Stalin and by drawing an association between the Soviet tyrant and the anthropomorphized tyrant, Napoleon. That was really hard to read. Anthropomorphized? Anthropomorphized? And this is followed by a point about Orwell's anti-totalitarian political stance. But note that we are not asserting that Orwell is definitely criticizing Stalin via his characterization of Napoleon, because of course we can never truly know the author's intention, but we can hazard a guess. Instead, we're simply suggesting this by stating a piece of contextual fact, i.e., Orwell was a socialist democrat, and socialist democrats tend to hold opposing ideological views to authoritarian fascists. They just do. At the end of the paragraph, we wrap up with another contextual link that connects Napoleon's expulsion of Snowball from Animal Farm with a similar political event in Stalinist Russia, which was Stalin's expulsion of Leon Trotsky from the USSR in 1929. And there you go, guys. Just some quick tips from me on how you can incorporate context in your next literary analysis essay. I hope this all makes sense, and please comment below if you have any questions. As always, do hit the thumbs up button below if you found this to be at all useful, and I'd massively appreciate it if you could subscribe if you want to see more useful English Lit study content from me down the line. I've also written a blog post analysing how Animal Farm works as an allegory, which you can check out in the description box below. Otherwise, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!